if you would like to download these files, if you don't have access to them, you can go to CoreyKerr.com/PS for Photoshop, and these files will be available to you. All right, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of Photoshop. Now, Photoshop is a pixel-based program, and that means that it's raster, so it does not work in vector, though there are some vector tools. You're mainly working with photographs and illustrations, those types of things. If you want to do things with a lot of typography or a lot of graphic design elements, you would do that in Adobe Illustrator. The icon for Adobe Photoshop is a blue PS, and when you open that, you'll come to something like this. If you've used it before, you'll have recent files. If you're logged into your account here on Creative Cloud, then it'll have these types of files. You can create a new file in which it'll give you recent saved. You can do photo, print, art and illustration, web, those types of things. For the purposes of what we're doing, we're going to open a file that already exists. It is a 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to open that here, okay? And let me give you a quick tour of Photoshop. So along the left side, you will see tools. Along the top, you will see menus. Just underneath the menus, you'll see an options bar. On the right side, you will see panels and palettes. On the bottom, you will see kind of a zoom, right? Now, you can see at the bottom of the screen on the left that whenever I use my shortcut keys, that those will show up down there on the bottom. So you can kind of see that. So this might change. I'm going to be working in a modified version of Essentials, and if you look over here, you can kind of see those, and you can save it. You can create a new workspace. These are workspaces. So the main thing that you need to understand is that Photoshop works in layers. And so we're going to open our layers panel. Now, if I mention a panel and you don't know what the icon for that panel is or where to find it, all of those panels can be found in alphabetical order under Window. So you go to the Window menu, you'll jump down to Layers, and that will open your Layers panel. Okay? If you would like your side panel here collapsed like I've got it, then you can come over here and hover until your icon turns into two arrows with the line and drag that over, or you can hit this double arrow right here. Same with this. It'll stack your tools, but you can also throw those off to the side like that. I prefer to have as much real estate in the middle as possible, so that's kind of how I do that. Real quick, when you hover over things in Photoshop, it'll give you a tutorial, you can watch a quick video, and it will show you what the shortcut is for that thing. So you can see that the shortcut for the Move tool is V, right? The shortcut for the rectangular marquee tool is M. Okay, now there's two M's here. You've got M for rectangular marquee and you have an M for elliptical marquee. And so if you hit M, let me move away here. If you hit M, it will select that. If you hit Shift M, then it'll toggle between anything that has M assigned to it. Okay, so we'll get more into shortcut keys in a minute. All right, let's talk about layers. Okay, so we get into layers here, and layers is a top-down situation. So you can see that this layer right here is above this layer with the silver can is above the layer with the red can. Okay, and so this is in front of that. Now, if I take my Move tool here, I can move that around, right? If I press Command T, it gives me a bounding box where I can resize this. Now, before I do anything else, I either need to say, no, let's not do that, or yeah, let's commit that. Now, this is an important part of Photoshop. Making these types of changes are called destructive edits, meaning that it will actually change the amount of pixels on this layer. So if I were to make this very, very small like this and press OK, and then later I wanted it to be much larger and press OK, it gets worse as I do that. I'm going to press Command Z twice to kind of undo that back to its original state. Okay, so you can reorder these layers, and you'll notice something about this red can versus this gray can. This red can doesn't have a background. Okay, so layers where there are no pixels, those layers are transparent, and you can see that some of these splatter layers have some transparency to them, meaning that they're partially transparent, not fully transparent. So whereas this can has a background that I can totally see through, these green layers have some parts of them that are actually translucent or transparent, right? You can kind of see through those types of things, okay? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to create a lower third graphic given what we have here, okay? Now, a little bit about the layers panel, okay? If you click on the eyeball, it will hide a layer, right? If you select a layer, then you can delete that layer. You can click and drag, and that layer will move wherever you drag it to. Notice that as you do that, it gives you a little blue line that says what it's in between or in front of. If you were to right click, you've got a number of options down here, okay? Down at the bottom, you can add different effects, and that'll bring that up. You can add a mask, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can come in and you can add adjustment layers, and these will do things. These are layers that will make visual adjustments to everything underneath it, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay, you can create another folder. You can add a new layer. Okay, or if you have a layer or multiple layers selected, you can delete a layer. Okay, so that's the kind of layers panel here. You can see as you select something that you can make it more or less opaque. With the opacity slider here, we can lock a few different things, which we're not going to worry about that right now. Okay, any of these panels will have this hamburger menu. There's a couple horizontal lines in the upper right hand corner of these panels, and if you click on that, there's a lot of different things that you can do with this. In this case, most of these examples or things are part of the right click menu that kind of come up there. So that's the layers panel. Okay. Now over here, you've got a number of tools. I want you to think of these tools the same way that you would think of your hand when you're working in a wood shop, right? Your hand is the same, but when you pick up a hammer, you're going to do a different set of actions with that hammer than you would if you pick up a screwdriver or a drill or a saw. And so your mouse is the same, but as you switch to different tools, what your mouse does changes based on which tool you're holding. Okay, and so I'm not going to go through all of these tools, but I'm going to go through the most significant ones. The move tool, this will move layers around, resizes layers, and rotates layers. Okay, and then you have selection tools. Now selections are interesting. Okay, because everything is made up of pixels, and I'm gonna zoom in here so you can see that. As we get close enough, you'll start to see that everything is made out of a colored square, right? And that is considered a pixel, right? If you were to press Command R, you can see that this is 1 pixel, okay? From 1100 to 1101, that's a single pixel, okay? And if we zoom out, you can see that as those pixels get smaller, eventually it starts to look like a photograph, and you can see that, we don't see the pixels anymore because they're so small, okay? And this is what's called resolution, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about resolution later, but you can select certain pixels, okay? And the way that works is you have a single, I'm going to select this can right now, okay? And if I just use my move tool, I can move the whole thing, okay? Command T, I can rotate the whole thing. I can make the whole thing bigger or smaller, right? If I hold Shift, I can squish it or whatever. I'm going to hit Escape there so that we don't commit any of those changes. But if I just wanted part of what's going on here, then I can use one of these select tools, okay? And so if I click and drag, what we have now is a selection, okay? Now, selection is indicated by a marquee. That's these marching ants, this dotted line that continues to kind of like move along, okay? And inside the selection, things will be affected. Outside of the selection, things will not be affected. For example, if I switch to my move tool and I click and drag, you will notice that only the stuff that was selected was affected, okay? Only the stuff inside of the selection, okay? If I use a different selection tool, okay, let's say that I use the elliptical tool, I can click and drag and you'll see that it makes a circle. If I want to add to this with a selection tool, then I can hold Shift and click and drag. If I want to subtract from this, then I can hold Alt or Option and click and drag, and you'll notice that it adds to or subtracts from the selection. Okay. Inside of these selections, I can do a number of things. So let's switch to a color that isn't prominently on that layer, and I can just draw. And you'll notice that where I am drawing with my brush tool right now, it only shows up inside of that selection. Whereas if I get rid of that selection, I can draw anywhere, okay? Or if I have a selection and I try to draw outside of that, it just doesn't do anything because it only affects what's happening inside of the selection. Okay, now I've done something that you need to be careful of. I've drawn directly on a layer. That is all on this layer. The information that's behind these marks that I made isn't there anymore. So I can't get this can back unless I come back and Command Z until all of my painting goes away. Okay, so what I should have done, okay, is made whatever selection I'm going to make. Let's go to our marquee here like this, and we'll do this, and we'll come in and do this, and then create a new layer. And on the new layer, I can fill it with color, or I can come in and I can paint different things on it. I can get rid of my selection by pressing Command D, okay? And because that's on a different layer, it doesn't erase or write over the pixels that are on any of the other layers. And I can move it around. I can change the order of it. I can Command T and resize this, okay? And you can see that that's how layers work. Those are selection tools. I'll show you a couple more here, okay? You've got the selection brush tool, the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool, okay? So this can that we have over here, okay? I'm gonna say gray can, okay? And let's hide our red can there. I don't want all of this extra stuff, okay? So there's a couple of things that I'm going to do here, but I want to delete all of this. Now I could hit my eraser tool and I could come in and it's going to say, the way that you brought this in, it's a smart object, and so you've got to rasterize it because you can't directly just erase stuff. So let's rasterize that. And if you don't get that, you can right click over here and you can go down to rasterize layer. Okay? You'll notice that there's a little icon right here. Let me see if I can zoom in. Okay? You can see this little icon right there, and that icon goes away when this layer rasterizes because it's no longer a smart layer. So now with my eraser tool, I can come in and I can erase this stuff, and so I can kind of do this. Not the most efficient or effective way of doing things, and in fact, if I erase like that, ooh, I needed part of that can back, you know, and so the only way I can get that back is by pressing Command Z because I just deleted it. But if I do a bunch of other things, right, I might go too far and then I can't get back because it's too far down. So using the eraser, not necessarily the most effective way of doing this, okay? But it can be helpful at times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection, and then I'm going to delete the background from that selection, okay? And so this is mostly a straight line. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to go polygonal lasso tool. I'm going to hit this edge here, and then hit this edge here, and then hit this edge. And then when I get to the top here, I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to try to click and drag. Oh no, look at that, I missed. Okay, we'll come back down here like this. Let's pull this around. Okay, and now I have a selection. Okay, well, I can again, remember, I can come in, I can zoom, okay? And if I hold Shift, then it'll add to that selection. And if I hold Alt, then it will subtract from that selection. Okay, so you can come in and kind of do it that way. Let's Command D. There must be a better way, and there is. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take a look at this, and let's go magnetic lasso, and I'm just going to sort of like draw along this edge. And you'll notice that it's sort of snapping to that. It's not bad, but let's see how well it does here. Not great. Let's delete here to see. Oh no. Okay, so here's another thing that we wanted to do. Okay, is I just selected the can instead of the background. So I'm going to go to my select menu and I'm going to choose the inverse selection, right? Select inverse. I can also press Command Shift I. And what you'll notice if we zoom all the way out here is that now we have the marquee is going around and in the side, which means that everything except the can is now selected. So when I hit delete, you can see that it does that, okay? But it's not the best selection. Sometimes this tool works, but it's kind of an older tool, and Adobe has come up with a lot better situations, okay? And so the lasso tool, the selection brush, I can come in and I can kind of like paint, right? And you can see that I can go like this, and then when I'm done, I click away from that, and I've got that, okay? So those are the basic ones. You've got your rectangular marquee, your elliptical marquee, those make a rectangle or an ellipse, okay? and then you've got your magnetic lasso, polygonal lasso, lasso tool, and selection brush, okay? Now, here's where we get into what they call the magic tools, or these are the tools that kind of try to figure stuff out for you, okay? I'm gonna start with the oldest one, which is the magic wand, okay? Now, the magic wand deals with a tolerance and a sample size, okay? And so if I go give me an average of 5 by 5, what that's saying is when I click on this, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to give me an average of 5 pixels around the pixel that I click on, okay? If I don't click on that, if I just do single point sample and I have a 0 tolerance, then when I click on this, it will select a single pixel unless the pixels around it are exactly like that. If I increase my tolerance a little bit, let's go up just a tad, you'll notice that it selects more pixels that way, and the more tolerant I am, the more pixels that it selects, right? But what you're gonna notice is that it is grabbing, I'm gonna hit plus here, it is grabbing a color, right? And so it's grabbing like a specific color range with a tolerance. You can choose contiguous, which is going to give you stuff that is going to be contained. If you take contiguous off, it'll give you everything in the picture that's kind of within that range. You can sample all the layers and it'll go grab everything that isn't even selected, okay? This can be useful, but in this case, we've got a gray can on a gray piece of paper, and so it's not the most useful. It can be. And just to show you what it's doing, right? If I hit delete there, then you can see that it kind of, has selected those, okay? So that's the magic wand tool, useful for selecting specific types of colors. Like if I wanted this gold here, I could kind of increase that and I could maybe grab most of those things. It's getting this gold and that gold, okay? Let's take a look at another one, the quick selection tool, okay? This is a little bit smarter, and what I'm doing is I'm painting over an object like this, and it's going to say, is this what you want, right? And it kind of does like a smart fill. And you can come in and make adjustments by coming in and saying, well, not that part, but I do want this part. Give me that, and give me this, okay? Give me this. And anytime I want to subtract from the selection, I'm holding down Alt or Option. Anytime I want to add to the selection, then I can just click and drag, right? It's just coming in like this. Oh, I don't want that stuff. Let's get rid of that shadow, right? And it kind of does that, okay? So that's the quick selection tool. Now, the object selection tool is very new, okay? And what the object selection tool does is it uses AI to analyze what we're looking at, and it will highlight different things that it perceives as objects. And you can see that the blurrier the things are, the harder it is for them to see. The things that are more in focus, the easier it is. And so I'm going to click on that object, okay? And it got pretty close. Okay, and so now I'm going to jump over, I'm going to zoom in on my edge here, and I can see, yeah, it's pretty close, but it could be straightened out in certain areas. I could tell that this is kind of hard here because it gets a little bit shadowy, and the hat here is the same color as that. So I'm going to come in, and I'm going to grab my polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to add to that part of the selection, just like that. And we'll click over here to kind of close that off. Selection's always closed to where you started. Okay, and we can kind of come in and we can sort of add the parts where it missed, something like that. Now, depending on how accurate this needs to be, sometimes this is great depending on the photo and things like that. Now, instead of deleting stuff this time, I'd like to introduce the idea of a mask. Now, if I want to mask a layer, what you're doing is you're not actually deleting those pixels. You're adding a mask that tells the computer whether to show or hide things. And it's telling the computer to show or hide things with this mask. And so if I have a selection already, when I click the mask button, what will happen is that where the mask is black, it will hide, and where the mask is white, it will show. So you can see that it gave me kind of a little bit of a fuzzy line there, and I'm not sure if I want that kind of fuzziness. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Command A, which is going to select everything. And with my mask selected, you can see that I have the layer selected here. I've got the mask selected here. With my mask selected, I am going to press Delete, okay? And that will delete all of the black, which will give me the white back, okay? So I'm gonna try one more thing. I'm gonna select my layer here, and I'm gonna come in, and I'm gonna go to Select Subject, Now, select subject is another AI thing, and it will come in and it will analyze it and it will grab what it thinks the subject is. Sometimes it's great, like in this case, I think it did pretty well. Other times it's not. You can also go into select focus area, okay? And you can see a little preview here, and you can kind of get more or less of the focal range and how much image noise you want and those types of things. You can soften the edge so it's a little bit fuzzy, okay? But for this, let's go select subject, okay? And yeah, we want to discard our current selection. Okay, so it gives us this, and I've already got a mask. And so now what I want to do is I want to invert the pixels of this mask, okay? Now, I could come in and I could fill this with black. And you'll notice that I have black over here, right? Or if I filled it with gray, let's see what happens. So let's fill it with a gray color. And you'll notice that it is semi-transparent now, okay? Now, how does that work? Well, when we're dealing with masks, the color of the mask or the value of the mask, the brightness of the mask, is going to be indicated by how light or dark something is. And the lighter it is or closer to white, the more visible it is. And the darker it is or closer to black, the more invisible it is. Okay? And so I'm going to come in here real quick and I'm just going to Command A again and delete. Jump back over here to our layer. Let's go to select subject, discard the current selection. It gives me that. Let's come over here. Now, I want black on the outside and white on the inside. So I could do one of two things. I could press Command Shift I, which will invert the selection, okay? And then I can invert the white, and the opposite of white is black. Command I will do that, right? Or I could Command I here, which will invert the selection, right? And then I'm going to press Command D to deselect that. I'm going to press Command I to invert the entire thing. So what was white is now black, okay? Either way, we now have a can, and it doesn't have a background, okay? So that's great. Okay, so those are some basics of the layers panel and kind of masks and how to deal with that. Now let's build our little thing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I am going to drag, let's say that I'm like sponsored by Liquid Death or something. Okay, and I am going to take these layers. Let's move some of these off to the side. I'm going to hide all these guys here. Let's bring our can back. I'm going to come in here like this, and let's have kind of two cans. We're going to make them roughly the same size here. Rotate one this direction and the other like this, and let's put the gray can in front of the red can. Make the red can a little bit smaller so they look like they're the same size. Great. Okay. Now I'm going to put some green splatter behind them. Okay. And if I want to resize stuff, I can press Command T, grab the corners here. I can resize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of these splatters behind the can. Now, let's say that I want this particular layer to be a different color, okay? And so this is where we might adjust different things, okay? And so there's a couple of different adjustments that we can do. Some of these are going to be destructive and some of them are going to be non-destructive, meaning some of them are going to be permanent changes and some of them are going to be changes that you can continue to do. So let's do some destructive editing first. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to come in and I want to change the color. So I'm going to go to Hue, Saturation, right? And we'll notice that in this menu, you can also see Command U, and that means that I could also do this by pressing Command U, okay? So that brings up this menu, and I can come in and I can slide these over here, and I can give us some different things. So I'm gonna slide this slider over, and let's give us kind of a warm color. We can saturate or desaturate it. I'm gonna have it a little bit more saturated. You can increase or decrease the brightness of that. I'm just gonna leave that at 0 right now, okay? And if I click OK, okay, then that commits that change. You'll notice that it is orange, right? Now I could also come in here, and let's turn this one on, and I'm gonna press Command 0 again. And I want this one to be kind of in front of that red can and much, much smaller. So I'm going to kind of bring this down to the bottom. Let's say like that red can is just like bursting out of this kind of green splatter here. Okay, that looks great. Okay, let's shrink down our orange here. Okay, and one more for good measure, just here in the back. And let's change the color of this one as well. Okay, This time I'm going to change this non-destructively. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over these layers down here, and you've got effects, right? And an example of an effect would be like a stroke. Okay, and I could add a red stroke around all of the pixels of that layer. I could increase or decrease the amount. Or I could do an inner shadow, right? And I could go to the inner shadow, and I could increase the distance and whatever inside of that, okay? Or I could do a color overlay, and this is a way to kind of change the color of something, right? Or a gradient overlay, and this is a way to change that, okay? And on and on and on, right? The ones that people use the most, drop shadows, I think are used a little bit too much, but you can come in here and you can change the distance, right? You can change the spread, tighten it up, and the size, those types of things, right? That'll give you a little bit of drop shadow, which can be helpful in text sometimes. Those are the effects. You can also do these adjustment layers. Now I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. Okay. Now this hue saturation adjustment layer, I can come in and I can do the same adjustment. Let's go for a blue this time. Okay. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. Okay. But you'll notice that this is slightly different than what we were looking at before. And now we have this layer that's on top of this layer. What we actually did is anything that is under this hue saturation adjustment layer will have that adjustment applied to it. But if we hide that layer, you'll notice that that layer is still green. So this would be called a non-destructive edit. And so I can do that. I can also move this up, and it applies that hue saturation to anything that is underneath it. Okay, so as I kind of move this up, you can see that it's making that adjustment. I just want that to happen to that splatter there. And so I can do another thing here where I just want to apply this adjustment layer to this layer by holding Alt or Option and Alt-clicking right there, and now it won't do it to anything other than that layer, right? It'll only apply to that particular layer. We've got our splatters and our cans. Let's add some bars in here. Those are way too big, so we're gonna shrink them down a little bit. Okay, and I want this bar to come out of behind the orange in front of the blue. And so I'm gonna move it so the blue is behind it and the orange is in front of it. And you can reorder those types of things. Okay, let's do another layer here like this. Oops, and we'll Command T for transform, and we can come in here, something like that. We're going a little bit high. We'll come across the bottom here. Okay, now if I want to stretch a layer without it sizing proportionately, I can hold Shift, and you notice it only goes one direction. If I don't have Shift, it's enlarging the whole thing so it doesn't get squished. And most of the time you want to do that, but sometimes you want to stretch it out. Okay, so I'm going to do something like this. I don't need these other ones, so I'm going to leave those. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to type my name by coming over here, and we'll find T. Okay, now we've got a couple of type tools here, and we're going to do the horizontal type tool. You can hit the letter T, and we're going to single click here, and I'm going to type my name, Coreykerr, and it looks like we can't really see anything. So I'm going to press this checkbox here, and it's like, oh, it's because this layer was just above the last one that I had selected. So I'm going to bring this layer to the top by pressing Command Shift right bracket, okay? And now we've got this kind of grayed out, okay? So I'm going to click on it with my type tool. When you're working with type, you want to select it with the type tool. I'm going to press A to select all the text, and let's make this red. Okay. In fact, I want it to be this color red. And so when I click on this in the options bar here, that's gonna change the color of this. And if I have this color picker open, when I move over, I can color pick anything in this. Okay. And so I can see what happens if I get a brighter red or a darker red. I kind of like that darker red there. That looks great. Okay. Now these are normal text controls that you can see, and you can come over here and you can look at them in the character and paragraph panel. If you go to Window, you can see character there, paragraph there. Okay. And this will have all of these. I've got a whole video on this, so I'm not going to go into this much. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to change the font. Okay. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to My Fonts, and let's kind of scroll down and let's find something that I like. I'm going to go Anime Ace. Great. Now, if you don't find any fonts that you like, you can click on More Fonts here. And if you click on More Fonts, this is searching the Adobe font library. These fonts are not currently in your computer, and so you would have to activate them. We're going to stick with the fonts that are in your computer right now. So you can see that because I have it selected when I come in here, as I mouse over, it shows me a preview. Now I'm gonna get out of this. I'm gonna go to paragraph and left align it, and then I'm gonna hit character, and let's make this bigger by clicking on that and dragging it. We want it should be really big. Okay, something like that. Okay, so now when I'm kind of going through, I can kind of see what's happening. Now I like Avenir Next. Let's do Avenir Next Heavy. That's nice. Okay, let's go with something weird. We'll do ultra condensed. Okay, so there's that. And then I'm going to put a title down here at the bottom here. So I'm going to create another text layer. Okay, and I'm going to single click there. And I'm going to say Illustrator, comma, Animator. This is really hard to read. So let's choose Avenir Next. And let's do regular. And then we'll shrink this down. Since it's the title, it'll be smaller. And I'm going to change the color of it to white. Okay, Move tool, put it down here in the bottom. Okay, switch back to our type tool. Animator, Designer. Okay, so you can do something like that. I'm actually going to put my website in here. Let's say that I'm doing this video for YouTube and I want to drive traffic to my comic book. I can go CoreyKerr.com/comic. Okay, great. Now I'm going to kind of offset that and move that around here in a place that kind of looks nice. And I can now grab both of them. Now, with my select tool, the move tool selected, one of the things up here in their options bar is you have auto select, and I've got layer or group. I'm going to leave it on layer right now. Sometimes you don't want that. You can also turn controls on so that you don't have to hit Command T. I find that to be a little bit annoying, but I'm going to go auto select. I'm going to click on this layer. Let's open up our layers panel so we can see what's going on. So that's selected. And then I'm going to hold shift and click on this layer. And you'll notice that both of those layers are now selected. So now when I press Command T, I can resize both layers at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to get this the way that I want it. And now I want to bring in my picture, and I can come in. Here's a picture of me and my daughter. I'm going to drag this over like that, or you can import it. But I'm just going to drag it over here like this. I'm going to resize this so it fits what's going on. Commit that. I'm going to move this under everything. And that's looking okay. I'd like to make a couple adjustments to this picture. It's a little bit orange, and so I can hit Command U to get that hue saturation adjustment. Shift that a little bit. Let's desaturate it some. Okay. Oh, I pressed cancel instead. Let's do some non-destructive editing. I'm going to come in here. We'll do some hue saturation, and we'll shift a little, desaturate a little, take the color out of that. Okay. And then I'm going to come in here like this, and I'm going to do brightness contrast. And I'm going to increase the contrast a bit. Okay, there we go. A couple little edits. All right, now this is kind of confusing. So I'm going to have one layer be lower third. Okay, and then I'm going to create another level, and I'm going to have that be image. Okay, and then I'm going to drag the image into my image with these on top as well. Close that down, close that down. Okay, and that's looking really nice. So then I would export this, and you can export it in a number of ways. But before I do that, I've got this kind of, I'd like this to be a little bit easier to see, and it's kind of poking up. And so I'm going to create another one. Let's see. Let's do this without, we'll see if this works. I'm going to apply to this an effect. And let's do a stroke on that effect. And I can already tell that I don't like that way. So that's okay. So I'm going to hit cancel. Okay. But I do want to put an effect on this, but I don't want the white all the way around it or the black. I just want it around the letters that are sticking out here. So here's a little trick. I'm going to take these and I'm going to create a copy down here where it says the new layer. I'm going to drag them down there, okay? And and I have a copy of those. I'm going to put those inside of a group, and we'll call this text copy. Okay, and I'm going to drag those inside of that group, and I'm going to put that group above the image, below that. What happened there? Did I drag the whole thing? I drug them all. Yep, we still want these up here, so we'll put these back. Okay, and I don't want to accidentally do something on this lower third layer, so I'm going to hit this lock button. Boom. Now I can't do anything on that layer. Okay, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add an effect. Let's add a stroke. And you'll notice as I add this that it's going around that, and that's because, let's change this from auto select layer to auto select group, and that's because it's surrounding this, but it was in the same spot as down here, right? So now I can come in, and if I want to re-edit this, I can double click on that effect, and I can come in and I can say, why don't you be this color? And we'll click OK there and be a little bit bigger. That's nice. And I can kind of see that a lot better now. Now I want to add one more thing. Okay, I want to add one more thing, and that's I want to add maybe a white painted stripe here. And so I'm going to go to my brush panel. Okay, I'm going to click on my brush panel here, and you're not going to have as many brushes as I do at first. Okay, I want you to go up to the upper right hand corner to the hamburger menu, and I want you to go get more brushes. Okay, and what this will do is it will open up this page in Adobe where you can come down and you can get these brushes. Okay, and so the one that I want you to grab, let's grab Dry Media. Okay, you're going to download Dry Media. That'll go into your downloads folder. We're going to go back to Photoshop. Okay, and then we're going to go import brushes. You will find your downloads folder. You will find the ABR file that you just downloaded, and then you'll click open. Okay, and that will bring that in there. Okay, and so I'm going to come in and I'm going to find my Dry Media here, Dry Media brushes there. Okay, and what I want you to do is choose Kyle's Ultimate Pastel Palooza. Okay, and we're going to create a new layer. And I'm going to double click on that text to name this brush. Okay, and let's open this up. I'm going to turn my lock off, and I'm going to put it above the bar. Okay, and then I'm going to change this color. Now, this color is this is called your foreground and your background color. Your foreground and your background color. If you change your foreground color, that's going to be what most of these brushes are going to paint with. Okay, I can then right click and I can change the size of this. Okay, and that will change that. Or I could come in and I could press the right bracket to increase the size and the left bracket to decrease the size. And I can come in and I can draw. I'm going to come in and just kind of draw something across the top here. And let's eyedrop by holding with your brush open. You can eyedrop by holding Option and clicking. And then I'm going to right across the bottom there. I don't know if I like that exactly. Let's eyedrop here. Okay, so that's a quick introduction into Photoshop. We've got layers, we've got masks, we've got selection tools, you've got type tools, you've got effects, you've got adjustment layers, and you've got all of the different tools that you can do, and a little bit of painting. We'll get a little bit more into this later, but this is a great start into kind of learning and understanding Photoshop.